remember when I told him, I said, don't worry about it, son, you'll beat my record. That's what it's all about. I mean, just like I said, Joe, if it had been a 7-minute standing ovation, they wouldn't have seen me cry. Now, you got to understand, you people didn't get to see me play, but they did.
Two very bad knees. And a dream to become a Major League Baseball player.
Strikeout of Steve Carlton. Well, Joey, he dropped his cap for the fans. There's a man who doesn't like public display.
Mike Schmidt and Pete Rose sit down to talk about Steve Carlton. When these titans of baseball get together and share their stories about what they witnessed on the field, something important happens. Something real, something profound. They do not talk about him as a friend. They do not recall funny moments or casual conversations. Instead, they describe Carlton as a force of nature, something almost supernatural. How good was Steve Carlton? That is the question that keeps coming up again and again. That is what legends actually say when you ask them to explain what they saw when they faced him on the field. Carlton was hard to deal with. He would not talk to reporters. He kept to himself. He was strange and mysterious. He believed odd things about the world. He was difficult. He was challenging. Yet every player who faced him, every catcher who worked with him, every competitor who tested himself against Carlton knew one simple truth. He was one of the greatest to ever throw a baseball. His silence was not a weakness. It became his greatest weapon. It became his greatest strength. It became his greatest asset. If you are enjoying this already, hit the hype button and give this video some hype so more people see what these legends have to say about Carlton. Share this so your friends understand what made him special. This is a story about what happens when a pitcher becomes almost completely focused on his craft. This is a story about what can happen when someone eliminates all distractions and commits to excellence at the highest level. This is a story about 1972, the greatest single-season performance by a pitcher in modern baseball history. This is a story about a slider that seemed to break the laws of physics itself. This is a story about a man who believed that words were wasted energy and that silence was power. This is a story about dedication and obsession. This is a story that the legends themselves tell, and their version is the only one that matters because they were there and they faced him. The 1972 season stands as one of the most dominant individual performances in sports history. Not just baseball, sports history. Truly one of the greatest single-season performances in the history of professional athletics. It is arguably the greatest pitching season ever. Consider this. The Phillies were a catastrophe. They were historically bad. They had no business winning 59 games. The fact that Carlton alone was responsible for nearly half those wins shows just how extraordinary he was. He was not just a great pitcher on a good team. He was a transcendent pitcher carrying a bad team. That is a different kind of greatness. That is the kind of performance that does not get replicated. That kind of dominance stands alone in history. Number 5. Tom Seaver was the other king of the 1970s. He threw for the New York Mets. He was the franchise. Seaver was known for his mechanics, his polish, his technical mind. He studied pitching the way a scientist studies nature. He was dedicated. He won 311 games. He struck out 3,640 batters. He took home 3 Cy Young Awards. Those are incredible numbers that belong in the Hall of Fame. But when you look at Carlton, the gap closes. Carlton won 329 games. Carlton struck out 4,136 batters. Carlton won 4 Cy Young Awards. So here are two pitchers of the same era. They were separated by skill level, the way professional golfers are separated by a single stroke. They were close, incredibly close, but Carlton edged ahead of the pack. Seaver once said something that stuck with people who study pitching. He said that watching Carlton pitch was like looking into a mirror. This comparison was profound. It was deep. Seaver would practice his own windup in front of an actual mirror to see what he would look like as a left-hander. When he looked at Carlton on the mound, he saw that image come to life. Carlton was the graceful version of Seaver. Carlton was smoother. Carlton seemed to move the way a left-handed pitcher should move, with flow and grace and efficiency. Both men used a drop and drive motion. Both generated power from their legs, from their core, from their entire bodies. Both hid the baseball well. Both threw fastballs and sliders that dominated their competition. They were technical mirrors, mechanical twins, separated only by the arm angle they inherited at birth. Seaver would later remark that he saw in Carlton the same total dedication to excellence that that burned inside himself. That meant something coming from Seaver. That was respect from one elite competitor to another. It was recognition between equals who understood what it took to reach the peak. The comparison was not just about mechanics. It was about mentality. It was about the willingness to suffer and sacrifice for the game. But their paths outside the game were different. Seaver was the all-American boy. He was articulate and intelligent. He was comfortable talking to the press and the public. He won people over with his words and his charm. Carlton was the opposite. Carlton was a recluse. Carlton was a silent warrior. Carlton was the anti-hero who refused the spotlight. This contrast made their rivalry feel important. It made their competition meaningful. It gave the baseball world two different ways to be excellent. You could be Seaver, sunny and ordered and rational. You could be thoughtful and media-friendly and still dominate. You could be accessible and still be the best. Or you could be Carlton, dark and silent, rooted in something deeper and more mysterious. You could refuse to speak and still be the best. You could choose isolation and still dominate. Reggie Jackson said once that blind people would come to the park just to listen to Tom Seaver pitch. They would hear the pop of the glove, the sound of the crowd, the pure baseball symphony, the experience of the game, the majesty, the brilliance. That same magic applied to Carlton's starts. When Carlton took the mound in Philadelphia, it became an event, a special event, a remarkable event. Regular season games turned into something special, something remarkable. Number 4, Tim McCarver was Carlton's catcher. He was not just a catcher, he was Carlton's confidant. He was his psychologist and his translator. He was the only person who truly understood him. He was the voice when Carlton refused to speak. The bond between these two men became legendary. McCarver once joked that when he and Carlton died, they would be buried in the same cemetery, 60 feet and 6 inches apart. That joke meant something profound. That distance is the distance between the pitcher's mound and home plate. That is where they connected. That is where they understood each other perfectly. That is where the magic happened. McCarver understood Carlton in ways no one else could. He saw a man who needed focus above all else. He saw someone who could be confused by complex scouting reports and preferred instead to rely on instinct and trust. He knew Carlton deeply. Inside the clubhouse, Carlton was actually vocal. He talked about pitching. He engaged with his teammates. But McCarver protected that sacred space. During games, when Carlton was on the mound, McCarver would sometimes visit and say something simple. Let us go play pitch and catch. He would reduce the pressure of a major league game down to 2 kids throwing a ball in a backyard. That psychological trick was essential for Carlton. It cleared his mind. It brought him back to what mattered. Pitching is fundamentally about throwing a baseball to a specific location. It is about rhythm and feel. It is about trusting your body and your training. McCarver understood this deeply and completely. McCarver knew Carlton's slider better than anyone. He provided a detailed breakdown of that pitch. He compared Carlton's slider to Bob Gibson's slider. Gibson threw a slider with loose spin. You could see the seams. You could track the rotation. The grip was visible. Carlton's slider was different. It had what McCarver called tight spin. It looked like a quarter coin spinning. The rotation was so fast and tight that the seams blurred into a white dot. Hitters could not tell the difference between Carlton's fastball and slider until the final moment. Then the slider would explode downward. It would drop out of the zone. The batter would be helpless. This tight spin was not an accident. It was the result of Carlton's specific training methods. His wrist and finger strength were unlike anything McCarver had ever seen. His hands and forearms were like steel. They were instruments of precision. McCarver recalled that hitters would come back to the dugout after striking out on what they thought was a fastball. They would say he got me out, but at least he did not throw me the slider. That comment reveals something profound. The slider had power that went beyond its physical effectiveness. Just knowing it might come made his fastball better. Just the threat of the pitch was enough to ruin a hitter's at bat. Hitters lived in fear of that slider. They would go up to the plate knowing that Carlton had a pitch they could not hit. That knowledge changes things. That changes how you approach the game. Number 3, Johnny Bench was the catcher for the Cincinnati Reds. He was one of the greatest players in baseball history. He was truly elite. Bench hit 3 home runs in a single game against Carlton twice. He did this once in 1970 and once in 1973. Those are rare moments. That is rare success against an elite pitcher. Despite hitting 3 home runs twice against Carlton, Bench still regarded him as a nemesis. Even with all that success, even with those moments of victory, Carlton was the bigger problem. Carlton was the bigger threat. Carlton described his battles with Bench with respect and confusion and awe. Carlton once said, "I do not see how a man can cover so much of the plate. I threw Bench 6 inches inside. I threw him 6 inches outside. It did not matter. Nothing worked." That comment shows why Bench was great, but it also shows why Carlton was great. Even when Carlton executed his pitches perfectly, even when he did everything right, the very best hitters could occasionally win. But it required something superhuman from them. It required something almost supernatural. It required genius. this. Bench's relationship with Carlton was not personal. It was competitive. It was pure baseball conflict. Bench knew that when he stepped into the box against Carlton, he was facing the best pitcher in baseball. He was facing someone who was dedicated to excellence. He knew that any success he found would be earned through skill and strength and a little bit of luck. That is what made the sport great. That is what made facing Carlton special. Every at-bat was the battle that mattered. Every pitch was significant. Number 2, Pete Rose was another member of the Big Red Machine. Rose was famous for his baseball intelligence. He had a keen eye at the plate. He knew how to get on base. He was one of the smartest hitters in baseball. He understood the game deeply. When Rose faced Carlton, he understood his own limitations. He knew that pulling Carlton's slider was a recipe for disaster. Pulling the slider meant a broken bat. Pulling the slider meant a weak grounder to second base. So Rose adjusted. He would bunt. He would slap the ball the other way. He would try alternative approaches because the straight-on approach did not work. He had to be creative. He had to adapt. This is what made Carlton special. It made legends change. It made great players deviate from their natural instincts. Number 1, Mike Schmidt was Carlton's teammate with the Philadelphia Phillies. Schmidt was himself a Hall of Famer. He was one of the great hitters in baseball history. Schmidt saw Carlton every day. He practiced with him. He played behind him. He watched him pitch game after game after game. Schmidt understood Carlton at a level that only a teammate could. Only someone who was with him in the clubhouse and on the field could truly understand what made him special. Schmidt once said that the aces of a pitching staff carry the team. That is true in baseball. Great pitchers are supposed to win more games. They are supposed to be the foundation. They are supposed to lead the way. But in 1972, Carlton did not just carry. He was the team. He was everything. The Philadelphia Phillies won 59 games total that year. Carlton won 27 of them. That means Carlton accounted for 45.8% of his team's victories. He won nearly half the games his team won. No pitcher has done something like that in modern baseball. No pitcher has carried a team like that since. It has never been replicated. It will never be replicated again. This was not a good Phillies team. This was a terrible Phillies team. This was a losing team, the worst team. The rest of the pitching staff combined for 32 wins. The team lost 97 games. That is a lot of losses. That is many defeats. The offense was weak. The defense was not great. The team struggled. The team fought. But Carlton showed up every 5 days, and he won. He made it look almost simple. He performed at his peak. He dominated. The Phillies knew that when Carlton took the ball, there was a chance. When anyone else pitched, there was no chance. Everyone understood what would happen. The numbers from 1972 are shocking and astounding. Carlton posted an earned run average of 1.97. He struck out 310 hitters. He won the Triple Crown for pitching, which means he led the league in wins and strikeouts and earned run average all at the same time. That almost never happens. He started 41 games. He completed 30 of them. He pitched 346.1 innings in a single season. Modern pitchers throw maybe 230 innings. Carlton threw 116 more innings than that. He was a different animal. He was a different breed of pitcher. To understand just how dominant Carlton was that season, consider that he won 27 games for a team that won only 59 total. His teammates combined to win 32 games. Carlton alone produced almost as many wins as the rest of the pitching staff combined. That is a statistical anomaly. That is almost impossible. The best pitcher on a great team might win 20 games. The best pitcher on a terrible team should win maybe 15. Carlton won 27 for a terrible team. He transcended his circumstances. He overcame the obstacles. He did not accept that his team's failures should limit his success. He decided his success would come anyway. That is championship mentality. That is the mindset of someone who will not be denied. His winning streak is part of the legend. From June 7th to August 17, Carlton won 15 straight games, 15 consecutive victories. During that stretch, he pitched 18 times. In those 18 starts, he threw 155 innings. He struck out 140 hitters. His earned run average was 1.51. Those are video game numbers. Those numbers seem impossible, but they happen. They are in the record books. Carlton was on another level from everyone else. Think about what a 15-game winning streak means. Winning 15 games in a row. That means for nearly 3 months, Carlton did not lose. He did not pitch a loss. Every time he took the mound, his team found a way to win. Sometimes the Phillies would score 3 runs, sometimes 2, sometimes 1, but it did not matter. Carlton pitched well enough that 1 run was enough. He pitched well enough that 2 runs was enough. He pitched perfect games relative to the run support he received. No margin for error, no mistakes. Just excellence and dominance. Perfection every 5th day. Richie Ashburn was a Hall of Fame outfielder turned broadcaster. He watched Carlton closely during those 1972 games. He watched him pitch from the press box. He observed everything. He was vigilant. Ashburn described Carlton not as an athlete, but as a craftsman. Ashburn called him an artist. Ashburn said Carlton painted a ball game. When Carlton finished painting that ball game, Ashburn said it was a masterpiece, a true masterpiece, a work of art. That comparison is important because it suggests Carlton's dominance was not just raw power, it was not just strength, it was a technical display, it was skill at the highest level, it was art, it was something that transcended sport. Willie Stargell was one of the great home run hitters in baseball history. He was a power hitter, he was a force. Stargell played for the Pittsburgh Pirates. He had to face Carlton regularly, he had to step into the box against him repeatedly, he faced him many times. When asked about hitting Carlton, Stargell said, "Sometimes I hit him like I used to hit Sandy Koufax, and that is like drinking coffee with a fork." That metaphor is perfect. It is genius. It is brilliant. It suggests that the tool the hitter has, the bat, is simply wrong for the problem presented. The slider is the coffee, the fork is the bat, they are incompatible. The task is not just difficult, the task is impossible, the task is futile. The physics of Carlton's slider come down to one thing. His release point was obsessive. Carlton threw all his pitches over the top. That release point was important because his slider was hard to tell from his fastball at release. In modern pitching terminology, this is called tunneling. The concept of tunneling is critical. To the batter, the slider and the fastball looked identical for the first 50 feet of flight. The pitches were twins. They seemed like the same pitch. It was only in the final moments that the slider would break. It would move down. It would move in toward a right-handed hitter's hands. By then, it was too late. The batter had already committed. The batter had already decided to swing. There was no escape. Carlton described the physical sensation with clinical precision and detail. He said the slider just rolls off of your index finger. The finger begins its spin, which takes it down and across the plate. Perfect placement. He said the key is not to twist your elbow or your wrist. It is about feel. You throw it with the wrist and grip set just like your fastball. Perfect execution. But you grip it slightly off center. You throw it with excellence and power. You throw it with the same velocity and intensity. Perfect control and mastery. That off-center grip allowed Carlton to maintain a fastball arm speed. That arm speed is what fooled the batter's timing. The batter thought fastball and he timed it for a fastball, but it was a slider. The deception was complete. The pitcher won the battle. The context of Carlton's 1972 season matters. He had been traded to Philadelphia by the St. Louis Cardinals. The trade happened in February of 1972. Carlton had just won 20 games the previous season. He asked for a raise. He asked for $5,000 more. The Cardinals said no. The Cardinals said that was too much. The Cardinals traded him away. They sent him to Philadelphia as punishment. They did not understand what they had. They made one of the biggest mistakes in baseball history. Carlton was rejected by the organization that developed him. Carlton was told he was not worth what he asked for. That rejection motivated him. That rejection became fuel. Carlton arrived in Philadelphia carrying that burden. His old team rejected him. His organization did not believe in him. Now he played for a franchise that had finished last in the East Division. He played for a terrible team. The city of Philadelphia was not known as a baseball hotbed. The fans were not expecting great things. The organization was in chaos. The roster was weak. But Carlton did not accept failure. He did not accept defeat. He refused to let his circumstances define him. He refused to let his teammates' lack of talent hold him back. He set a mental goal. He decided that no matter what, no matter how bad the team was around him, he was going to win 25 games. He said, "I was mentally committed to winning 25 games with the Cardinals, and now I had to rethink my goals. I decided to stay with the 25-win goal. That is compartmentalization at the highest level. That is the mindset of a champion." Carlton's training was revolutionary for its time. He worked with Gus Hoefling, a martial arts instructor and conditioning guru who worked with the Philadelphia Phillies. Hoefling introduced Carlton to training methods that were decades ahead of the era. These methods were innovative. These methods were cutting edge. The training drew heavily on Eastern disciplines. It focused on core strength and flexibility and isometric power. It was comprehensive. The most iconic element was the rice bucket. This training became famous. Carlton would plunge his hand into a bucket of uncooked rice. He would perform a series of twists. He would perform grabs. He would perform karate chops. This exercise seems strange to modern eyes. It seemed strange then, but it was functional. It was practical. It worked. The resistance of the rice strengthened the tendons and ligaments in his wrist and forearm without the jarring impact of weights. This specific strength was crucial for the tight spin of his slider. To snap a slider with the violence Carlton did, repeatedly, for 300 innings a year, pitcher required immense distal strength. The rice bucket provided exactly that. It built the specific strength he needed. No modern pitcher would do this exercise. But Carlton understood that to throw what no one else could throw, he had to train in ways no one else trained. Carlton trained with intense stretching and calisthenics. He maintained his high leg kick. He kept his deep stride. He stayed strong deep into games. He could pitch complete games in the heat of summer. He could go out every fifth day and pitch 9 innings without being taken out. He could dominate from the first pitch to the last. He claimed to be in the best shape of any athlete at the time. That claim was bold, but his ability to complete 30 games in a season backed it up. No modern pitcher completes 30 games. No modern pitcher could endure that workload. No modern pitcher has the conditioning or the mental toughness. Carlton's silence was the final piece of his mystique. In 1974, Carlton made a decision. He stopped talking to the print media. He maintained this silence for 12 years until his tenure with the Phillies ended in 1986. This was not a temporary boycott. This was a philosophy. It was a chosen path. He would commit to this silence no matter the cost. The silence grew from Carlton's negative experience with the Philadelphia press. He felt his words were twisted. He felt the criticism was personal and unjust. He said to pick up the paper and read about yourself getting slammed, that does not start your day off right. The press hurt him. The press made him angry, but the silence evolved into something more strategic and powerful. Carlton discovered that talking to the press took his focus away. He said, I found that talking to the press took my focus away. I thought about it for more than a year and finally decided I was cheating the fans and myself by allowing myself to be diverted mentally. It was one less obstacle for me like the hitter. Silence became a competitive advantage. Silence became power. By removing the obligation to speak, Carlton removed a distraction. He removed something that took mental energy. Every word he did not say was energy he could use on the mound. Every interview he did not give was focus he could maintain on his pitching. This was brilliant. This withdrawal aligned with Carlton's interest in Eastern philosophy. It aligned with what Mike Schmidt called a Zen-like ethic in Carlton's preparation. Carlton approached pitching like meditation. He approached baseball like a martial art. He approached the game as a spiritual practice. Everything was connected. The rice bucket was meditation. The silence was meditation. The pitching was meditation. It was all one system working toward one goal. Carlton believed in achieving a state of perfect focus. He believed in eliminating the noise and distractions. He believed in becoming one with the task at hand. This is the essence of Zen thinking. This is the wisdom of the East. This is what separates good athletes from the great ones. The silence created a vacuum as the press filled it with myth. Because they could not interview Carlton, sports writers wrote about his presence. They wrote about his mechanics. They wrote about his results. They wrote about what they saw rather than what he said. They had to observe. They had to analyze. Carlton found this amusing. He said the irony is that they wrote better without access to my quotes. After that, they wrote better and more interesting stuff. He was right. The mystery made him more interesting. The refusal to speak made the world pay closer attention. It made people focus on what mattered. The words were not important. The performance was important. The deeds mattered. The results defined him. The silence also served as psychological warfare against opponents. It was calculated. It was strategic. In an era when players socialized and spoke through the press, Carlton was unknown. He was a cipher on the mound. He did not complain about injuries. He did not boast about victories. He did not provide bulletin board material. He simply executed. That approach was threatening in a different way. Other players could be gotten to. They could be distracted. They could be angered by words or disrespected through media. Carlton could not be distracted. Carlton could not be gotten to. He was unreachable. He was invulnerable. Carlton also developed some controversial beliefs during his isolation. Reports surfaced about his belief in fringe theories. He believed in conspiracy theories. He expressed beliefs about secret laboratories and manufactured viruses. These beliefs contradict the Zen-like focus of his pitching. Tim McCarver, ever loyal, acknowledged these views, but framed them as resulting from a mind that becomes confused with radical material. The same isolation that perfected the slider also allowed conspiracy theories to take root. The laboratory was a place of both physical genius and conspiratorial darkness. When all of these elements come together, the picture becomes clear and vivid. Carlton was a man of contradictions. He was a public figure who refused to speak. He was a teammate who carried a franchise but isolated himself. He was a physical genius who believed strange things. He was a craftsman of the game who also retreated into darkness. He was all of these things at once. That is why the legends describe him the way they do. That is why they struggle for words. That is why they cannot reduce him. They cannot reduce him to a single dimension. He cannot be fully explained or understood. They do not call him a friend. They do not recall conversations or inside jokes. They describe him as a force of nature. They describe him as a craftsman. They describe him as a nemesis. They describe him as a mirror. They describe him as a legend. When you ask these legends what made Carlton great, they struggle for words and meaning. The numbers are great. The slider was great. The season was great. But there was something else. Something more, something deeper. There was something about the silence and the intensity and the dedication that went beyond baseball. There was something about the way he approached the mound like it was a temple. There was something about the way he refused to compromise. There was something about the way he turned personal rejection into excellence. There was something transcendent about what he did. The 1972 season will never be replicated. In the modern era, with pitch counts and five-man rotations and specialized bullpens and strict limits, no pitcher will ever win half their team's games. No pitcher will ever throw 346 innings. No pitcher will ever complete 30 games in a season. That season belongs to Carlton alone. That season is his monument. That season is his legacy. That season stands alone in baseball history. But the real monument is something different and profound. The real monument is the way his silence forced the baseball world to look at what mattered. Without quotes to distract us, without words to fill the void and clutter, we were left with motion and mechanics and results. We were left with the slider breaking in on the hands of great hitters. We were left with the sight of a man standing on the mound, 60 feet and 6 inches from his catcher, playing a game of catch, while the entire world watched in awe. When legends are asked about Steve Carlton, their answers tell you something important and profound. They tell you that greatness is not always comfortable. Greatness is not always personable. Greatness is not always easy to understand. Greatness can be strange and isolated and difficult. Greatness can be complex and contradictory and mysterious. But greatness is also undeniable. Greatness is also unmistakable. You see it and you know it. You face it and you respect it. You remember it for your entire life. That is Steve Carlton. That is what the legends say when they are asked how good he really was. He was one of the greatest there has ever been in baseball. He was a force of nature. He was a craftsman. He was a nemesis. He was a mirror. He was everything that made baseball great. He was everything that made sports great. His legacy stands forever. His legacy is secure. If you loved hearing what these legends have to say about Carlton, please like this video right now. Show your appreciation. Show your support. Please subscribe to this channel so you do not miss more videos about baseball history and the great players who shaped the game of baseball. These videos matter. These stories matter. Please leave a comment below and tell me who your favorite pitcher from the 1970s is. Tell me if you think Carlton was the best pitcher of that era, or if you think Seaver deserves the crown. Tell me what you think now. The conversation really matters. Your thoughts matter. Thanks for watching this video about how great Steve Carlton really was. Thanks for understanding his greatness and appreciating his legacy here today.